Well, the composition that you returned to, that you wrote a long time ago, what about the story behind that? What was you said that you had an idea about what the melody was, and it
Mm.
was very you could it wasn't tangible before. Was it the story that made it tangible?
What most people define as a melody, but a melody could also be a rhythm, a rhythmic statement. It could be a chord statement, right? So it could be other elements of music that are not called melody, but are kind of a melodic idea. So my theory is that music is 99% what you can grunt.
Mhm.
All of the notes that you use to make your idea more sophisticated are crucially important. But at the end of the day, if you like Oye Como Va, you're just wandering around your house going, right? That's all that every song can just be. Jimi Hendrix was great at that, right? Voodoo Child. It's just grunting, right? It's such a that's the thing that's universally compelling to people is that if you could take the most sophisticated thing possible and just turn it into something that is just stuck in somebody's head because of the melody behind it. Now the story comes in when it's how many permutations does it take? How many twists of the Rubik's Cube does it take to make this melody fit in a way that a band can play it? Right? So a Rubik's Cube is a good analogy. You have all the blue parts and they're all mixed up all over the place. To
Mhm.
you, in my mind, it makes perfect sense that it's just blue. You have to twist and use all your skill set in order to get all the blue parts on one page so everybody knows that, oh, now this is the blue part. Do you understand? I mean, that's kind of what it's like. These things kind of exist in the world. They exist in nature. You have to have a strong enough skill set where you can excavate them
Mhm.
from nature. That's what the story is. What you went through to excavate it. If you leave a trail of breadcrumbs, in other words, this part of the melody is a swing feel. This part of the melody is in 5/4 and it's a different feel. In other words, a trail of breadcrumbs that the listener knows they can interpret swing feel. They can interpret an open section.
Mhm.
That portion of the melody lives in the swing feel. This portion of the melody lives in a Latin feel, right? So that's what I mean by the story. You
Mhm.
can listen to 5 seconds of any one of the 40 tunes that I've composed over the course of my records, and you know exactly which tune it is.
Mhm.
So that to me is what makes it exciting. That's why I'm compelled to continue to tell stories and continue to make records, is because that's the exciting part of it to me, is that telling a different story every time. And it's much like dealing with students who are not musicians. I'm elevating the voice that's in this composition. And Dave Stryker said it best. He said, "We're not trying to reinvent the wheel." In other words, if something comes to you, don't manhandle it to such a degree that it's becomes something else. Try to retain the character of it when it first comes to you. That was incredibly wise advice that Dave gave me. It's kind of like lay off, sit back, let it live its own life.
It sounds to me like the story is polishing the rough diamond. It's you have to polish it right, otherwise it won't work. It's not going to be a diamond. And there's a skill set in polishing, and every diamond is different.
I think that's great. Yes. Dave, when I was at UMass, it was an incredible environment because there was so much that I could do to be close to music without. I wasn't a musician at the time. I was struggling to be a musician, but I was interning at a concert series. I was interning and learning how to write grants. I was on the radio. I was writing for the school newspaper,
What were you
and
doing on the radio?
I had a show.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I had a show on WMUA,
Mhm.
which is a, very well respected, jazz radio station.
Mhm.
Um, much like yours.
Mhm.
And I hosted a show. And that was a way for me to express an interest in music without really being able to participate as a musician.
Let's talk about Pat Martino. How did you meet him and start working with him?
Iron City was following him at Chris's Jazz Cafe, which, it's almost like being an opening act, but it's like a late night set, right? So Pat would play in Philadelphia every 6 months or so at his home base. And I started doing the late night set. Then I got promoted to following Pat, which was a coveted gig. And he would stay and listen, So we did that several times. I would follow him all over the region. So if he was in New York, I would be at maybe not every night, but I would come a couple nights if he was at Blue Note for 6 nights, or if he was at Birdland or the Iridium. So I would be right there in the front row for multiple shows a week. So he got to recognize me. And
Mhm.
then he eventually, I became friends with like the guys in the band and other people he kind of had an entourage with him. So I kind of became like a known person in that circle. And then one night at Blue Note, he gave me his card and he told me to call him to come down and start taking lessons. So
Mhm.
he basically recruited me to study with him.
So, when at that time when you were studying with him, were you still composing, or was it in the back of your mind?
No, I write all the time. Writing for me is not, it comes kind of naturally. And that's really because of Yusef. Both Yusef and Pat were, they were like-minded in many ways, but this childlike curiosity about music, this childlike curiosity about their own curiosity, right?
Mhm.
They were both intrigued by their own curious nature about things. So for me, I've never been uptight about writing and about expressing my own ideas. That probably comes from starting later and from the people that I encountered who were my mentors. I mean, there's really no limits to what I become interested in terms of pursuing for a composition.